criminal investigations have been initiated against the Mumbai-based chemical giant United Phosphorus Limited. This follows the environmental disaster caused by a fire in July at the company's warehouse in Durban. Now, it's alleged that UPL had not obtained a critical risk assessment or planning permissions from the eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality to house the chemicals in its warehouse. In fact, Environmental Affairs Minister Barbara Creecy yesterday describing the incident around the warehouse, saying that it caused the most serious environmental catastrophe in the country in living times. Let's touch base with our reporter Karinda Jagmohan, who's tracking that story for us. And Karinda, perhaps a good place to start is just to take us back to exactly what happened.
Yes, good morning to you. So this happened during the July unrest around the 12th of July when the warehouse was set fire. Now, the cause of the fire is still being investigated, but it's alleged that the fire started by rioters who went to this warehouse here in Kunubia, north of Durban, and set it alight, not knowing what was contained inside. Now, Michelle, it's alleged that the warehouse contained several hazardous chemicals, many of which are actually illegal to contain in a warehouse like this in other countries, or even here in the eThekwini municipality, according to bylaws. And now those criminal charges have been placed against this company because it's alleged that the company itself did not follow due processes when actually applying to contain the chemicals here in this warehouse. Michelle, after the warehouse caught fire, we saw black plumes of smoke come out of the warehouse and go into the nearby suburbs. And this left a number of residents having respiratory illnesses. They couldn't breathe. They had difficulty as well, saying that they had black phlegm. Many of them still experiencing some of those illnesses today. Aside from this, we also saw damage to the environment where, because of chemical spillage into the nearby water systems, we saw marine life wash ashore nearby the rivers, and the water, the color of the water itself turned a blue color because of the chemicals. So what the Environmental Minister Barbara Creecy said yesterday when releasing a report following investigations into this fire and the warehouse itself, she described this as one of the worst environmental disasters we are seeing in this country in living times. Now, the Green Scorpions is an investigative team that is looking into this incident, and they will continue investigating. But ultimately, it's alleged that the company itself did not follow due processes, including having a risk assessment done before storing those hazardous chemicals here in this warehouse. And I must also just highlight that this is not just an industrial zone. It's nearby the Umhlanga Gateway area as well as the Kunubia Verulam area. So there's a number of suburban residential areas in this community, and so it is alleged that it would have been illegal for this warehouse to store a number of chemicals. We understand hundreds of hazardous chemicals here in a warehouse like this and together. And also now we understand, following cleanup operations, at least 13,000 tons of contaminated solid waste has been removed from the warehouse and its surrounding areas, along with 23.4 million tons of contaminated liquid waste. That's so far the cleanup around this area, and that cleanup still continues. But today we're going to speak to some of the residents, specifically the residents of the Blackburn informal settlement that is situated literally just behind the warehouse itself, that experienced the worst of the aftermath, and they'll tell us how they're feeling at least over 2 months since the fire had started.
So, Karinda, from what you're describing, it's the fire that actually revealed the extent of what that company has been doing and its lack of compliance.
That's correct. Actually, when the fire started, our Newzroom Afrika team went to the warehouse. This was around the early week of July 12th when the unrest began, and it was said that the warehouse caught fire. But at the time, we were even told by firefighters then that the black liquid that was kind of seeping through the ground was extremely dangerous, and we should not even step on it. And it was that fire, and it was that start to investigations where residents had realized that there was something amiss here with this specific warehouse, and they questioned the environmental disaster that followed, the aftermath that followed, and the severity of the environmental disaster, and as well as the health impacts for residents which then prompted the investigations, only to find out that it's believed UPL, it's a Mumbai-based multinational chemical giant, had not followed due processes by storing those hazardous chemicals here in Kunubia, in the semi-industrial suburban area. And we understand that when you look at the list, a number of the chemicals that were stored here are even banned in other countries, including Europe and Germany, among other parts of the world. So what we're seeing now is that the company itself is facing criminal charges, and we're only going to see afterwards exactly the details of these criminal charges and what would be the consequence and the responsibility now for the company itself.
No doubt a developing story we're keeping our eyes on for you. Karinda Jagmohan, thanks very much for that update.